Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to yet another Mortal Kombat History of video, with us still covering the 3D era of characters. Today, voted by all of you in our weekly character poll, in what I will say was quite a landslide victory, my god. I will of course be covering the Cleric of Chaos, Sower of Anarchy, and Titan of Madness, Havik. Now Havik is a very intriguing individual to that of the Mortal Kombat universe, as his origins are unlike any other within the franchise, having derived from that of the Chaos Realm, something introduced during the 3D trilogy of games. Despite being a relatively latecomer to that timeline, Havik's unique design, iconic face, and unhinged desire for insanity really broke him from the mold of what was previously seen. But with that said, and his appearances being few and far between, how did Havik come to be? What became of him in the 3D games? And how has he settled into that of the new era? Well, that is what we will be exploring in today's video. But before we do start, I highly recommend checking out the Havik retrospective, as I will say it's a pretty interesting deep dive analysis of his characterization and significance to that of the 3D era. You can find that video in the top right corner. But before we do begin, as always, if you're liking these sorts of videos and do wish to see more, please do give it a thumbs up, as it really does help the channel in the algorithm. And hey, if you want to stick around to see more, please do feel free to subscribe, as we have new episodes every week. Anywho, let's jump right into things. Now for us to really understand and do a deep dive of Havik's history, let's actually talk about his creation, the purpose behind it all, as well as his design. Because originally, well, his unique look wasn't actually even intended to be his own. As despite Havik's debut having taken place in Mortal Kombat Deception, Havik's character design was actually intended for that of Noob Saibot, presumably an alternative skin for him in Mortal Kombat 4. Of course, this would be scrapped, but this didn't entail its end, as it continued to linger on the cutting room floor. And fun fact, in the beta, Havik wasn't even called Havik. His beta name was actually Scab, and yes, because it is MK, it of course had a K. Havik's debut would be in Mortal Kombat Deception, part of the ever-expansive entourage and design philosophy of the 3D era. As during this time period, the realms and world of Mortal Kombat would be expanded in a really big way, as the Conquest mode enabled an open world design and exploration of the realms like never seen before. Thus here we would be introduced to two completely new realms, Saido, the realm of order, and the Chaos realm. Now these two realms couldn't be more different from each other, as they were on polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Where the Order realm thrived on a brutal, authoritarian regime of control and submission, the Chaos realm allowed freedom, anarchy, and even madness to thrive. So much so that it was tied to that of the lands itself, letting them defy the laws of nature with nigh immortality. They even spoke backwards, for God's sake. And this was all caused at the dawn of the realms, because upon the one being's separation, an unnamed god of chaos, presumably their guardian and somewhat equivalent to Raiden, caused what would be known as the Tempest, a cataclysmic event that quite literally shattered the foundation of the realm. In his death, his madness would be sown into the land beneath his feet. So whatever world this could have flourished into would instead turn into one of madness. Thus, all children and beings birthed from these lands would be inflicted with his somewhat gift of chaos, with Havik being one of the many blessed by these supernatural abilities. Now the nature of the Chaos Realmers themselves is quite unique, as they don't hold nor maintain any relationships with other realms. And due to them having a somewhat cult-like nature to them, Havik and his brethren seek to spread his madness beyond their home, wishing all realms and all worlds to embrace their chaos. And also, just before we do touch on Havoc's origin here, fun fact about the Chaos God is that these ideas weren't something strictly original or new to the MK universe, as such ideas and concepts would actually be explored in the non-canon Malibu comic book line, as there was even a Chaos God known as Zagat introduced during this time. So little fun fact for you all who may be unaware of the expanded media and canon. Now the birth and creation of Havok is relatively unknown, as we don't know much of him or how he came to be prior to the events of Deception, only that he is a cleric of chaos who is very protective of his home, his culture, and seek to spread it across the realms. Chronologically, in terms of appearances, Havok makes his first canonical appearance in Mortal Kombat Conquest Deception mode. Here, he would be approached by the Earthrealmer and supposed emissary of the Elder Gods, Shigenko. The mortals sought out the Kamidogu of Chaos, and seeked guidance from him to obtain it. Something Havok was willing to assist in, but only if Shigenko helped him, as prior to his arrival in the Chaos Realm, it had been invaded by the Order Realm, as they looked to siphon the Chaos Realm's water. Something sacred to them, as its shapeless, malleable form made it impossible to control, the perfect relic to worship. Thus, the invasion of the Sidons caused a lot of troubles and issues for his people. So he would give Shigenko the mission of tracking them down and defeating them, something he would very quickly achieve. So to thank him for his efforts, he would teach Shigenko the ways of chaos, before then handing over the keys to obtain the Kamidogu. From this point onwards, we now actually move on to the canonical events of Mortal Kombat Deception. And here, Havok plays a rather active role from that of the Shadows, as the rise of Onaga has naturally caught his attention. To Havok, the return of Onaga was incredibly problematic, not just because of the threat he posed with the Kamidogus, but the power he wielded allowed for complete control and subjugation of the realms, allowing him to transcend to divinity in the process, something he understandably stood against. But he couldn't deny that the end game of his goal was definitely something he bared interest in, as Havok wished to consume Onaga's heart, believing that by doing so he would gain his ability of necromancy. For what greater form of chaos was there than defying the laws of life itself? His quest to stop Onaga had him cross paths with the speedster Cabal, but coming off the tail end of Mortal Kombat's Deadly Alliance, he was actually reeling on death's doorstep, as he had been ambushed in the previous game by the Red Dragon fighter, Movado, and even stripped of his very own hook blades. Life was slowly slipping from his grasp, so Havok, seeing him as a valuable ally, would actually nurse him back to health. Tempering his rage and guiding his anger, he was able to sway him to his side. By poisoning the mind of the former hero, he was able to convince him to reform the Black Dragons, the very reason why Movado had hunted him. Now, despite their numbers, as well as Cabal's new recruits, Kira and Cobra, Havok was smart enough to know that this wasn't enough to stop Onaga, so he would actually actively seek out others to assist him in his cause. Now, it is worth being quite transparent and clear here. It's kind of unknown just how much of a part he did play in Onaga's downfall, as whilst we do know that Liu Kang banded with the likes of Shigenko, Nightwolf, and Ermac, Havok isn't really mentioned amongst those names, nor is he actually physically featured in any of the panels. So whilst not seen, it is very softly implied that he did play a part here. Up to what extent, however, we sadly do not know. But by the end of the game, Havok is able to somewhat fulfill his wish with Onaga's defeat, but is of course unable to obtain his heart. Coming into Armageddon, this timeline would of course begin to come to an end as the prophecy of Armageddon would commence. In this installment, Havok would play a very minor role, as due to the large roster, we have very little details of what he got up to, or what really became of him in the fall of Deception. He would, however, feature in the game's Conquest mode, but only as a mere illusion, battling the Edenian demigod, Taven. The real Havoc would make his last and final appearance during the Battle of Armageddon, joining the forces of darkness in their war against the light. But these efforts would all be in vain, as despite his ties to that of the Chaos Realm and defying the laws of mortals, during Armageddon he would actually perish, being one of the many that fell during that day. Now, coming into the Reboot timeline of Mortal Kombat 9, Havik would initially make a canonical appearance, but only during the MKX comic book line. In fact, during this time period, he was framed as the main big bad and antagonist of this line, utilizing what is known as the Blood Code, a powerful form of blood magic that he enchanted the Kami Dogu daggers with. Anyone that was cut by these blades would be infected by his possession, allowing him to sow chaos across the realms. Unfortunately, despite its initial release being canon, this comic book line would sadly later be retconned. Thus, to maintain the continuity of this video, and somewhat streamline things, I will be excluding it. But I do want to navigate you to the older History of Havoc video, where this was initially canon, and I do go into more depth there. So if you are at all interested, please do click in the top right corner now. Moving along, that finally takes us to that of the new era, and here Havik is drastically changed, as Liu Kang's vision is actually one without the Chaos Realm. In fact, Havik isn't actually Havoc, but more so a title bestowed upon a character known as Dairo. Now, Dairo himself was actually another character introduced all the way back in Deception, being a playable character, but one who had a very minor role in that game. In fact, in that timeline as a whole. In terms of story and narrative, Dairo was a former god of the Order Realm, stripped of his title upon killing the man who murdered his family. Upon being freed from his shackles, he would hold a strong form of disdain towards Saito, actively fighting the cruel regime he once served. And here's where things get quite interesting, because in his bio, it does mention and tap into the idea of chaos, but at no point in time was there ever really a connection between these two characters. It's only until that of the new era where these two are finally put together, with Dairo taking on the title of Havoc, of course once again in active defiance of the Order Realm. Here though, unlike the events of the prior timeline, Havik wouldn't actually have a family here, as his fall from grace was actually due to the very cruel way they punished him, believing that the only way Saito could be saved would be by purging it. Havik would create a resistance, and a very uneasy partnership with that of Quan Chi. By partnering with the Necromancer, Havik would be granted incredible supernatural abilities, and embraced the nature of his character through chaos. So in this timeline, it is implied that it is Quan Chi who is responsible for his supernatural abilities, especially seeing as he only just arrives from the Order Realm. So this now takes us into the events of the game itself, with Havik making his first appearance during Ashura's chapter. Here, he and Darius can be seen working alongside Quan Chi, handing over a mysterious red crystal so he can power his mysterious soul harvester. By doing so, it is able to give shape and life to that of Ermac. But at the same time, they would be attacked by Earthrealm's champions, with he himself battling the likes of Ashura. Whilst able to hold his own, he is simply unmatched by her skill with the Datusha, being defeated but not slain. In his defeats though, it would allow him to later appear at the Ying Fortress, guarding the stronghold and keeping out many intruders. And whilst for the most part he is successful, the Lin Kuei were able to infiltrate the facility, with Scorpion and Sub-Zero leading the charge. But with Bi-Han's betrayal, Kuai Liang is forced to fight his way out, defeating the likes of Rain, before then being confronted by the Sidons. And whilst Havik and Darius do have the numbers game, Kuai's skill proves to be far too much for the pair, melting off half of Dairo's face, giving him the iconic Havik look, before then defeating the duo. Now narratively, this is the last time we see him in game, at least this Havoc. Because in the aftermath of the game's story, after the Deadly Alliance crumbles and Titan Shang Tsung is defeated, Havoc's fate is largely allocated to that of arcade ladder endings, being revealed that in the game's aftermath, he would actually achieve his goal of cleansing Cydo. By banding with Outworld's Hydromancer, Rain, he is able to cause a great flood that kills many of its inhabitants. With tens of thousands dead, Havok is finally able to obtain his home, seeking to turn it into an anarchist utopia. But this wouldn't be the only Havok featured in Mortal Kombat 1's ending, because in the fall of Armageddon, yet another would emerge from the ashes of war, a Titan variant with his legion of acolytes, swearing that the next time such madness, such murder, and such anarchy would occur, it would never stop. Unfortunately, in terms of narrative and story, there is very little we know of this Havok here, as we don't even know what timeline he derives from, as whilst a majority of the Titan heroes we see are intended to be the ones from MK11's arcade ending, Havok was notably a character that did not feature on that roster, so we have absolutely no idea where this variant derives from. But with that said everyone, that has been it for the history of Havok, and I do hope you have enjoyed this video and learnt more by doing so. Hopefully I was able to spread the message of madness, because I'm a really big fan of this character, his concept, and his design. Whilst I'm not too keen on his Dairo counterpart, I am interested in his Titan variant, as this is effectively a villain that's been set up for a very long time now. So with that said, what are your thoughts on Havok? And what would you like to see from him moving forward? What was your favourite version of the character? Please do comments down below. But as always everyone, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to keep an eye out for this week's character poll. For now though, that's been it for me. So as always, take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.